Keith Smith at Keith Smith NBA, Yahoo Sports. He'll join us right now on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline with what's coming up for basketball. We know that the state of New Jersey opened up for sports teams to resume, which means the Sixers had their practice doors open today at the training center in Camden. But when is the real possibility of getting back on the court, and what will it look like? Keith Smith joins us now here on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline on the Sports Bash with Mike and Broads. Keith, what's going on, pal?
Hey guys, how are you? I'm excited. It looks like we're getting basketball back. It's it's a fun time.
Yeah, we know that here in Jersey, the Sixers were back at it today. They sent out a memo that said that voluntary workouts can resume. So I guess with players coming back, the thought of being out there. What do we know in terms of time frame now? I mean, I know we don't have a style of how this is going to work out, but do we have some sort of time frame now that we're anticipating?
Yeah, it's getting a little more firm as the days go by here, what this is starting to look like. It all starts with really by the end of this week at the Board of Governors call on Friday. It's expected that Adam Silver will tell the teams, go ahead and feel free to recall your players to the home area, or to maybe it might be a temporary home base for those that aren't open yet. That is still up for negotiation. But recall your players, get them back into the market, and that's going to be more of a mandatory thing versus a voluntary that we've seen so far. Now, that's not a huge deal because the voluntary workout attendance has actually been really, really good. So they're not overly concerned. From there, then it's going to be we're going to start some form of, probably within a week or two from there, some form of internal training camp held wherever the home locations are. Then it's going to be pick up and move to Florida, a couple more weeks of a training camp, and then everything will get started mid to late July, probably closer to the late July side, and that'll get everything up and running again.
Yeah, once everything is kind of settled in here, I guess, with getting the training camp set back up and the timelines, do you anticipate some sort of format? Are they still working on that? I know they sent out a text, I guess, a week or so ago. What kind of feedback? What are we feeling about what kind of style that we will see? I mean, keep in mind, the NHL has made their announcement, so does basketball follow them? Do they kind of go their own way? What do we know about how basketball might look?
Yeah, for a long time, the NBA really wanted to bring all 30 teams back. The goal was play some semblance of regular season games, fulfill those regional sports network contracts, get that money flowing back into the league, and get moving in that direction. Now it really seems like for timing and logistics purposes, that seems to be really kind of going away. Those teams that have no shot at the playoffs too have really, some of them are very interested in coming back and playing, but several others have said, well, why? This doesn't really make a lot of sense for us. I'm not so sure this is the best thing. And a lot of them have said, we're not going to play our main guys. We're going to hold guys out and everything else. So I think what you're looking at is either going to be the top 16 teams, so the 16 playoff teams, and we go right into the playoffs, or it's going to be what I call the playoff plus model, which is there's 4 teams in the Western Conference that come in, 20 teams come in, and we get that playing through. There's been a lot of talk of potentially World Cup style group stage and those kind of things. And I'll tell you, there are a lot of teams that are very against that. They don't think that that's a great idea because it's just changing too much as we move into this when there's already enough other things going on. But a mini play-in tournament to get the last seeds decided, I think that is on the table.
Reporting there is a plan progressing which would allow limited number of family members to eventually join the players for the games. Do you think that this is something that is on the table instantly or something that will take more time to eventually get to?
No, I think that's on the table. I think what the idea there is as you start to thin out the bubble, maybe after the first round of the playoffs and half of the teams are gone, then that opens up available rooms and that's room there. And I think they would like to have the idea of, let these players have some of their family and folks there with them as they advance into the playoffs. And then whoever eventually wins is there to help celebrate that accomplishment with them. So I think that is highly likely that they will have some family come in. But what's funny is I was talking to players today and yesterday, several of them are really taking the approach of this is really a business trip for us. We're going there to win a championship. This is not a go here and have some fun. This is an all-star weekend. Yeah, that's not what this is about. Well, we're going there to win. And one guy's specific comment to me was, Braun goes 0 dark 30 every year at the playoffs or whatever it is. Well, yeah, that's for us too. If we're going to Florida, we're going there to win it.
Keith Smith, obviously the NBA creeping closer to a return. What is your feeling and the NBA's thoughts on finishing out this regular season? Does that seem like that is now off the table? I think that was one of the options that was, presented, was pick up where you left off. Does that seemingly feel like that is less and less of a possibility?
Yeah, there is almost no chance. I will say there's no chance of finishing it out to get to 82 games. But I will say the other piece is even getting to the 70 games for all 30 teams, that is looking extremely unlikely. There's just not a lot of time to do this. They don't want to drag this thing too far. They've given up on being done by Labor Day. Now they're knowing this is probably going to stretch into mid to late September at least, but they don't want to be, stretching into October and the like, because that just starts to really make things tough to get next season going. So I think they're mostly, for the most part, giving up. Now, there's going to be some level of games played that may be treated more like preseason as warm-ups for these playoff teams, but it's most likely going to be a short amount of that, maybe a little bit of a play-in to determine the playoff teams, then we get right into the playoffs.
Going on with that and looking at the late August start that is possible, do you sense that we might even be seeing a best-of-5 series instead of the best-of-7, similar to what the NHL kind of came up with?
Yeah, there is that proposal's been put on the table that hasn't been rejected. That would only be for the first round. Adam Silver's goal all along has been to maintain 7-game playoff series as much as possible. He believes when you run that gauntlet, that crowns the best team as the champion. Whoever got through that, they're the best team. They're worthy, and that's they don't want to do too much to take away from that. There's a very much an understanding within the NBA of people are already screaming asterisk and all these other things. This isn't a real season. It's not a real champion. So they're conscious of that to the extent of we want to make this as normal as possible to crown what we feel is a worthy champion. And for what it's worth, in my opinion, is everybody's coming at this thing from the exact same place. So whoever runs this, wins it, that's going to be a worthy champion in my book.
Yeah, that'll be interesting. To see what the thought is when this is all said and done on how this champion, if we hopefully get one, is recognized. But what is the world, compound, I guess, if you will, better than anybody, is the anticipation that there's going to be multiple games happening at one time. How would that setup look?
Yeah, everything that Disney is doing is preparing to have 2 of the 3 arenas at the ESPN Wide World of Sports complex set up to be game courts. And I think when we watch the NBA anyway, if you take those first round, there's always nights where there's 2 games on at once. That's just the nature of trying to get those things done in 2 weeks. You've got 8 series to get completed on each side of the bracket, or 8 total series, 4 on each side of the bracket. You're going to have to play 2 games at once. So they are prepared to set up 2 as the game courts, and then the third would be set up with multiple courts to be the quote unquote practice facility.
Damian Lillard was very open about not playing if he doesn't have a chance to make the playoffs, and they're 3.5 games back or so from the Memphis Grizzlies as we speak. How do you think him coming out will impact the decision of the NBA moving forward when they know and understand that players are going to be unhappy if they can't make a run at this thing?
Yeah, I think it's something the league is very conscious of. They also, going back quite a ways to when the Golden State Warriors, Steve Kerr said, we're already, our season's over, where that's where our mindset is at. And I think the NBA understands a couple things with this. One is those teams that are really, truly out of it, it's not all that different than late March and April for those teams anyway. Those teams, that's when guys have back spasms, or it's a completely different connotation. They have flu-like symptoms, and they don't play in a game, and they sit out. And because you're kind of just playing out the string, you don't want anybody to get hurt. That's a major part of your roster. So they understand that. But a guy like Damian Lillard, if Portland is there, it's starting to shape up at this point that they're only going to be there if they have a real shot at getting into the playoffs and then making, an appearance that way and making some noise. So I also think of it as it was, we heard LeBron James say, I won't play if there's no fans. And then within a day or two, we walked that back and said, hey, that was heat of the moment kind of thing. I think these guys, they're passionate. They feel a certain way, but I think sometimes when they have a little bit of perspective and can take a little bit longer of a look at it, sometimes their opinions change.
Yeah, and you wonder how much playing games with no fans would impact this season. You got a team like the Sixers who are 29-2 at home and almost reversal. I mean, not quite that bad on the road, but not very good on the road, and then taking the home momentum out of things. I mean, that has to be a very odd scenario, when you play a summer league game in Orlando, I can't recall. There's not like bleachers in there, right? It's like a regular walled gym. There's no seating in that place, is there?
Yeah. Well, so it'll be when they played the summer league in Orlando. That was at the Orlando Magic's practice court, which is attached to the backside of the Amway Center. There was a small section of seats on the camera side of the court, so you never really saw them.
Okay.
But there was no fans. It was completely closed to the public. It was only NBA personnel, agents, scouts, and media. That's all that was in there. There were no fans. Now at Disney, the main game court that I think will be the HP Fieldhouse, that's akin to a small college, like a mid-major college gymnasium. In a normal environment, it would seat about 5,000 or 6,000 people. There's clearly not going to be that many because there's not going to be fans there. Eventually, maybe the families get in and they can attend these games, and that's what it'll be in the gym. But yeah, that is something that's interesting. The lack of a home court. It was brought up to me as one coach told me, young teams are the teams to watch out there because they're the ones who rely the most on the lift from the home court. Joel Embiid was actually a player that was called out to me by a team specifically who said he's a guy who really thrives on the home court. He plays to the crowd a lot. He lets them lift him and lets them carry them. And they called out the Miami Heat and the Philadelphia 76ers as two teams who really took advantage of good home crowds. They were very supportive and got behind the teams, and they're clearly not going to have that in this environment where it's going to be completely closed to fans.
Yeah, at this point, Keith Smith with us. That's interesting, by the way, that those two teams were brought up specifically, Embiid and that whole thing, which doesn't sound so far-fetched, by the way, 29-2 at home. Is Walt Disney Resort, hockey hasn't announced their cities, but it sounds like you could have East and West areas. Is every team Walt Disney World, or is there a West Coast and an East Coast possibility?
No, I think it's all going to be Florida. The momentum for any other sites really died about a week or so ago. That really fell off the map. They got really focused on Florida. I think that's when they started to understand, too, bringing all 30 teams wasn't probably overly realistic. I think the NBA wants us all in one place, controllable, eliminate travel entirely. We can get everybody, once they're there, and we get this thing done and get this season moving. And that seems to be where they're headed. It's going to be just Walt Disney World at this point. Nobody else is really even in the picture. And I was told, both the NBA and Disney over the weekend announced, we're in negotiation, but we all know how that goes. When entities that big even give you a sense that they recognize or acknowledge publicly that there's negotiations, that means we're down to the detail phase and crossing the T's and dotting those I's.
All right, Keith Smith, we'll leave you. Mark Cuban has a plan. He proposed that they extend the playoff format to 10 teams from each conference and play at least 5 games prior to going to the playoffs. And then basically you would do a 10, a 17 would play 20, 18 would play 19 in a one-game series. That would get you down to the 10, and then, you would be able to kind of go from there. Do you think Cuban has a strong enough voice that might be the way the NBA will come back?
Yeah, he's got a pretty strong voice, but I think he's got to really work against 29 other folks in that room, and I think there are several teams that are going to raise concerns about that. I know the Orlando Magic and Brooklyn Nets are both, wait a minute, we are 5.5 and 6 games clear of the playoffs right now. Why are we having to be in the mix? We weren't going to lose these spots over the final 15 or so games. That wasn't happening. So they are very against that. The Grizzlies, They have a little bit less to say. They're about 3.5 games up on the next 4 teams in the West. But what is interesting is I give Mark Cuban a lot of credit because he put his own team, the Dallas Mavericks, who are currently in the 7th seed, and I believe are 10 games up on the 9th team in the Western Conference. He put them in the mix and said, hey, well, we'll play, and if that's what it needs to be, we'll play. But I don't think that's going to be one that's overly well received by a lot of folks. I think it's going to really be the teams that are in, minus those teams that are chasing Memphis for that last spot. Those are going to be the teams that are going to be playing to get in.
Keith Smith, of course, covers the NBA, Yahoo Sports, and he joins us here each week as we're getting closer to a possible return of the NBA at Walt Disney World, possibly late July, early August is the target. Sixers, by the way, were back voluntarily at practice today in Camden. Keith, take care, pal.
Absolutely, guys. Thanks for having me. I'll stay safe. You know.
Absolutely. At Keith Smith NBA, and he, like all guests, here to be the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. So I've seen the date of July 22nd being floated around out there to restart things. So we're a little bit over a month from the potential of them tipping it back off.